The biggest news yet from the Mueller investigation dropped a few days ago. So, Paul Manafort, Trump's former campaign manager, was found guilty of tax evasion and bank fraud by a jury in Virginia. And then minutes later, in New York, it was Trump's longtime former lawyer and, as they called him, the fixer, Michael Cohen. He pled guilty to tax evasion, falsifying submissions to a bank, and, perhaps most importantly, campaign finance violations. So, this is big news, and it's big news for a number of reasons. But I think the most important reason is Michael Cohen testified in court that he was directed by a candidate, that would be Trump, to basically violate campaign finance laws by paying off Stormy Daniels for the affair that Trump and her had, paying off Stormy Daniels with campaign money. So that's a clear violation of campaign finance laws, and it appears like now they're caught red-handed because Michael Cohen is saying in court, implicating Donald Trump in a federal crime. So if you remember, when I covered the Stormy Daniels story, which, by the way, I'm very happy to say I've only covered it like once or twice because I try to focus on the issues that I think are substantive and directly affect the American people. But the one caveat I mentioned when I covered the Stormy Daniels story, and in fact I waited until this angle of the story came out before I even touched it, is that the only way this could be a real story is if when they paid the hush money, it was done with campaign money. Because if it's done with campaign money, that's just an obvious violation of campaign finance laws. That's unethical, clearly, but it's also illegal. And that is a situation where that scandal might actually have an impact and might actually take down Trump. It's kind of like getting, a mobster on tax evasion. I mean, that's what that kind of reminds me of. But it's still legitimate. If he paid off Stormy Daniels with campaign finance money, that's clearly illegal, and then there might actually be action taken. Of course, one should point out that it's hilariously ironic that it takes paying off a porn star with campaign funds before, people actually focus on the campaign finance issue in general in the U.S., because let's face it, if Donald Trump takes campaign money from Goldman Sachs, if he takes money from any criminal big bank, if he takes money from defense contractors, so if he partakes in the military-industrial complex, if he takes money from ExxonMobil, nobody bats an eyelash, and everybody's like, oh, no, that's totally normal. Having legalized corruption and bribery in this country is totally fine, and that's not even weird, and that's not even close to illegal. So it's hilarious how we all, when there's, clear brazen corruption in front of us, we're all just accustomed to it, so the media's like, there's no story there. But it took a porn star, paying a porn star off with campaign funds to get people to maybe focus on campaign finance and go, oh, that does appear to be illegal. So, but this is real. This is real as a heart attack. And now Donald Trump is going around doing panicked interviews, and he's tweeting in a panicked way where he's like, was it paid with the campaign? It wasn't paid with the campaign. Rigged witch hunt. There's a rigged witch hunt. Except here's the problem, Don. The exact things that they're talking about here. So again, Paul Manafort found guilty of tax evasion, bank fraud, among other crimes. And then Michael Cohen, tax evasion, falsifying submissions to a bank, and campaign finance violations. Here's the thing, Don. This has nothing to do with the Russia investigation. This has to do with the angle of the Mueller investigation that, again, I covered as soon as that article came out. It was in Bloomberg, and it said, oh, now the investigation is being expanded. They're not just focusing on potential treason with Russia, which, LOL with me, you're never going to get that because that didn't happen. They're focusing on Trump's businesses and his associates and their business empire and potential financial crimes in that respect. which you are 100% going to find stuff if you do that, because these guys are all entitled corrupt criminals, and they did find that stuff. So now one of the dodges Trump is making, and I find it hilarious because there is a grain of truth in it, is he's like, this is the Russia-rigged witch hunt. This had nothing to do with Russia. There was no collusion. But he says all that, but then, like, he doesn't address what this was actually about now, which is, again, tax evasion, bank fraud. So he's right when he points out, the thing with Paul Manafort's got nothing to do with me. It's got nothing to do with me. Go look at the crimes they got him on. Nothing to do with me. He's actually correct when he says that. What he's not correct about is the Michael Cohen thing, where he says, it wasn't with the campaign. Well, he just testified in court it was with the campaign money. So this is serious. Now, it does get a little weird, though, and this is something that you're not going to have many commentators from the left admit to, but I think it needs to be brought up because it's true. You know, Giuliani was doing his rounds, of course, dodging in every imaginable way, and basically saying, you can't indict a president. And then the response from some people that I've seen on the left is, there's no federal statute that says you can't indict a president. That's kind of a dodge as a response, because that doesn't really address the issue. Under the Constitution, you'd have to impeach a president. So it does kind of leave an open legal question as to whether or not a sitting president can be indicted. I mean, again, I guess the argument is, you have to impeach. But what do you do in a situation where you basically have the president on a crime, but there's no way that the Republican Congress would impeach? Because I think that that's the situation that we're going to be in, is, in 99.5% of circumstances, the Republicans are basically going to say, hey, you can fuck right off. We're not going to impeach. And they'll come up with their own bullshit excuse, and they'll, rationalize it and justify it. But I don't think a Republican Congress is going to impeach. So since that's the case, what do you do when you know you have the president on clear crimes, but you can't impeach? Can you indict? So I think if they do try to do something like indict President Trump, well, then that sets up a constitutional crisis, because then it would probably have to go through the court system, and it would probably, I don't know how it would unfold. And I don't think even people who are constitutional scholars will, if they're being honest with you, they'll tell you, I don't know where we go from here. If they don't impeach, what do you do? What do you do? I don't know. It's an open legal question as to whether or not you can impeach a president, indict a president. You can impeach a president, but I don't think they're going to do it. So then it is possible that even given the fact that now they appear to have Trump on something, that nothing happens. That it's like, okay, we have him, and then? No, and then. We just have him. And it's like, whoa, well then, what a tremendous amount of political capital that was wasted. Now, I'm not saying that the Manafort and Flynn, the actions taken against them aren't legit, because on the contrary, I think they're totally legit, and I'm happy that Mueller went after them. And I hope Mueller goes after Kushner and many of the other people in the administration who are obvious criminals. So I think that's all legit. But the question is, politically, what makes sense? So does it politically make sense to put front and center what's happening with Mueller, and then you kind of run on that if you're Democrats? I'm not so sure that's a brilliant idea, because it's almost like you're sucking all the air out of the room, and in the process diverting from the substantive policy issues that you definitely would win if you ran on those issues. And all for what? And even if you get what you want, let's say Trump does get impeached, then you get Pence. That's just as bad. So I don't know what happens from here. I genuinely don't know. I'm very curious to see. I mean, I guess they could try to indict, or they could try to impeach, which won't work. And then, I think you will have... What I fear is Trump being able to use this and spin it for his political advantage, believe it or not, because his whole thing when he started was like, I'm the forgotten man, will never be forgotten again. I'm here to take on the establishment. And then when you have very powerful interests lined up against him, he's able to continue to make that case in the same way that, when I go after CNN or mainstream media, when they go after Trump in ways that I consider stupid, like, Brooke Baldwin giving that rant about how the president curses and calls people names like dog and how that's so mean, words matter, sir. And that allows Trump to then turn that back around and go, I told you the fake news is out of control. They're getting mad at me for cursing and for calling people names. So that only makes him stronger because, yes, he told you the fake news is out to get me no matter what. I mean, look at that. How are you going to come after me for calling people names? Whatever. Who cares? So I worry about the political fallout of this. But in terms of the substantive situation that we're currently in, oh, goodness gracious. Trump was surrounded by career criminals. Trump himself, I'm sure, is a career criminal. We've already covered the story. He has legit ties to the mafia. We've spoken about that. He was laundering money through his fucking Panama hotel. So Trump is definitely a criminal. And Trump is definitely, guilty of all different kinds of corruption and money laundering and you name it. So it's just a matter of where we go from here. Because now we have Michael Cohen testifying in court. Yeah, I broke campaign finance law when I was directed by Trump. And it was to pay off the porn star that he had an affair with campaign money. Oh. Now, why would he use campaign money? That's the other question. Well, listen, man, we're going to get to the Duncan Hunter story in a little bit. I mean, probably the biggest answer to that is just entitlement. Entitlement? Yeah, I get to do what I want. You feel like you're invincible when you're that kind of a person. I mean, Trump spent his whole life kind of just getting away with shit. The dude went bankrupt 6 times, and he still somehow portrayed himself as a masterful businessman, which is bullshit. So it's this feeling of entitlement. I think I can get away with this, so yeah, I'll do it. Nobody's going to, what, they're going to check? Nobody's going to check. Nobody's going to come after me. What the fuck are you talking about? I might be president shortly. So yeah, I'm going to fucking pay for it with campaign money. And then also, there's the thing other people have brought up, which is, who knows what his actual financial situation is like, Donald Trump. Like I said, his businesses went bankrupt 6 times. He's known to be a bullshitter. So maybe in terms of actual cash on hand in his accounts, maybe there's not that much. And maybe he feels like, I couldn't take a hit of $150,000 or whatever it was to pay Stormy Daniels. So he's like, okay, just pay for it with the campaign money because I got all that money sitting there. So I don't know why he would take it out of his campaign, but Michael Cohen testified in court that is indeed what he did. And then the other thing that's weird is, I think, was it Manafort who came out and said, I will not accept a pardon or something, or a commutation from the president, which is like, maybe that was Cohen, I'm not sure. But that's almost like a clear sign, like, oh, I'm not going to play ball here, and we're coming after you, which probably has Trump shitting himself, because if he can't rely on even that to get him out of this situation. But also, there's another constitutional crisis, which is, should the president be allowed to pardon people who are doing crimes where he's implicated in the crime? See, I mean, I would argue that is so close to just pardoning yourself that that obviously shouldn't be allowed, because then we don't have rule of law. Then we have a dictatorship. Then we have a unitary executive. We have an authoritarian leader who gets to override, law and say, I'm above the law because I'm just going to pardon myself every time I do something wrong. So I don't think that's, again, it's another constitutional crisis, but it looks like we may actually have to cross that bridge where we have that conversation of like, hey, is a president allowed to pardon himself? And is a president allowed to pardon, somebody who does a crime, but he's implicated in that same crime? I mean, that's crazy. You're going to be able to pardon somebody who's like your friend and your associate, but you were implicated in the same crime. I mean, we can't have that. That's insanity. That would be sheer insanity. I hope any court would realize the danger that would represent. But that's, again, we're at that point. I mean, look at the situation that we're in. What a fucking mess we're in. So holy shit, who knows what happens going forward, but anybody who does, let me be clear, anybody who does tell you they know what's going to happen going forward, they're just full of shit. They have no idea what the fuck they're talking about, but it is getting really interesting, to say the least.